So, class in the book of Revelation, people are already made jokes like, so Jady, gonna have all the answers? And my response is yes. I mean, the goal is we're gonna have all the answers, No, we're not gonna have all the answers. But I do think we will be able to have an encouraging quarter together. So I want to do some introductory thoughts, but then jump into Revelation chapter 1. And then kind of as the quarter goes, keep adding more and more introductory thoughts. I didn't want to spend a whole class on big picture stuff. I thought it'd be good for us to jump into the text. But for at least some kind of introduction, what comes to mind when you think about the book of Revelation? What are words or images or topics, or what are some things that come to mind on this book? Okay, the 7 churches. We'll really hit on that. So that's good. That's a good one. Overcome. 17 times in the book? That's good. That's good. You should teach this class. Okay, what else comes to mind? Symbolism, yeah. Daniel, good. In fact, what we'll see is there are just parallels to all kinds of prophetic books. Almost every verse is just going to have an Old Testament reference. But absolutely, Daniel is at the top of the list. Good. Yeah, Dixon.
Restoration of the relationship with God.
Okay. And the statement towards the end of the book, I'm making all things new. Very good. Yeah, Brian. Endurance and hope. Good. Good. All of those are things that we're going to see in the book. Now, the book of Revelation, I believe, is falsely interpreted in many religious groups as basically kind of being all about stuff that hasn't come yet and is almost kind of like a screenplay of what might happen any day, right? Any day, we're going to start seeing these things happen. I hope that we'll see that that's not the way we should be reading the book of Revelation. Our approach this quarter is going to see Revelation more as a sermon than a screenplay. What do I mean by screenplay? Screenplay is, when you make a movie, all the scenes, all the dialogue, everything, that's the screenplay. So I want us to see Revelation more as a sermon than a screenplay. And so, our goal is not going to be to figure out, well, when was this fulfilled, or how is this fulfilled? That's where we have all the questions. We have all the questions with, well, when did this happen, or how did that happen? I think if we just kind of change our approach to be more, if this is a sermon to me, if this was a sermon to Christians 2,000 years ago, then how can this apply? And so our focus is really going to be more on practical application. So if we read a chapter, you're like, whoa, what's this about? Instead of us trying to figure out what it's about, our focus is going to be, well, what's the spiritual lesson for us? What's the application for us? And then I think Revelation is going to very much come alive as something that is hugely relevant to today, America today, relevant to those things. Let's skip the last point. We won't have answers to everything of what everything means, but we can be greatly encouraged as we see the spiritual lessons that Revelation is trying to teach, not just 2,000 years ago, but to every generation of Christians. Okay, so some bad preoccupations with Revelation. Number one, in the religious world, people love to solve the Revelation code. In other words, trying to include current events. Oh, this earthquake happened. Well, that must be, Matthew 24 or Revelation coming to life. Or there's a famine over here. Oh, that must mean that. And so kind of solving and even spending years of their life trying to put together, the Ezekiel passages and the Daniel passages. And the assumption, without even realizing it, is they're like, well, we're supposed to see that as about to happen now. A lot of times it's because, Revelation says the time is near, it's about to take place. And so I'm sitting in my living room in 2023, and it says it's near, about to take place, and I go, oh, it's near, it's about to take place. But it was written 2,000 years ago, and people 2,000 years ago were sitting around reading it, saying it was near, about to take place. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to think that there's something special about my 2023 living room as opposed to 2,000 years ago. And so here's the mistake. 500 years ago, people were making this mistake. 500 years ago, people were saying Revelation was about stuff in their day. You know, it's the Pope, or no, it's Martin Luther, or, you know, whatever. 20 years ago, people were saying it was about stuff in their day. 5 years ago, you know, and who's the Antichrist? Antichrist isn't mentioned in Revelation, but people lump those things together frequently. Well, you know, who the Antichrist is, it's just always changing, because you're thinking this current problem, this current guy's got to be it. But then 100 years go by, and no one thinks that must have been the Antichrist, and that kind of idea. So that's a bad preoccupation of trying to always be looking for current events and trying to fit that in. Jesus said these things would shortly take place, and he said this 2,000 years ago. And so that's really the framework that we need to be working with as we look at this book. Many passages, but Revelation 1:1, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show to his servants the things that must soon take place. Verse 3, the time is near. Okay, but here's another one, and this is one I think that we in this room, I suspect, are more likely to get caught up in. We get too focused on what exactly was the historical fulfillment. And so we read a chapter and we go, oh, what's this about? When did this happen? And that's all we care about. And it's like, unless some preacher or some Bible teacher out there figures out for me what exactly this is fulfilled, it's like, well, that's a wasted chapter. Oh, you know, read the section. Well, when did this happen? I don't know. Well, that's a wasted chapter. No, we're too focused on what exactly was the historical fulfillment. And we'll even do this in this class. We're not going to even overly focus on if the book is about Jerusalem versus Rome. The fact of the matter is there's evidence that looks like more about Jerusalem. There's evidence that looks like more about Rome. And I would have a lot to say about that, but that's not what the focus of our class is going to be, because the particular fulfillment is less important than the lessons that we're supposed to be learning. We do need to see this book would apply to Christians in Asia in the first century. Jesus said these things are about to happen. So that needs to be our framework. So whether we're thinking this is about stuff happening in the 60s or about the 90s, you know, that to us shouldn't make too much of a difference. We can get lost in the weeds about what's the historical fulfillment, and then we're missing the encouraging spiritual points along the way. So that's going to be our basic framework as we're going through the book of Revelation. Comments or questions on that so far? Yeah, Bruce.
I was thinking, we don't let Hebrews, not knowing the author, change anything in the book. Neither should we let time period in Revelation change what the book's about.
Yeah, the basic points that the Christians need to hear. Yeah, because the thing is, as I believe, the book is written in a way that it's going to apply to people throughout time that are reading it. And so instead of getting obsessed with what the primary application was, is if it's written in a way to apply to us, you know, it's the great example. One of the things I think about from Revelation all the time is, you know, once the land beast shows up in chapter 13, and we know this because it's a popular passage, right? Unless you have the mark of the beast on you, you can't buy and sell, and you're in trouble. You're kind of kicked out of the marketplace. You're kind of kicked out of the economy unless you have the mark of the beast on you. So people take that all kinds of directions, right? But the point is I see that happening today as Christians are going to get more and more tough with having a job in a more and more wicked society. So if when there's a brother who loses his job because he won't do fill in the blank, that's Revelation 13. He's losing his job. He's getting kicked out of the marketplace, can't buy and sell because he doesn't have the mark of the beast. Well, that's a very practical thing for us to think about, but people don't think about that. They just want to know about computer chips and 666 and Monster energy drinks and you know, Josh knows what I'm talking about. Was there another hand over here? Yeah, Brent. Yeah.
They promote that kind of thinking, and then people just go off with wild thoughts. That's like you said. How does this really apply to me? All these parallels happening today.
Yeah, exactly.
That kind of thinking.
Yes.
Much better than getting lost in all that specific mysticism.
Yeah, absolutely. And the book is written to be exciting. I mean, there's a interesting memoir of a top New Testament scholar today, N.T. Wright. He's over in England, but he wrote that as a teenager. He read Revelation for the first time, and it was just like, I didn't know this was there. This is incredible. The power and the symbolism and the energy and the pictures from the book. It's supposed to be that way, right? And you read this and you're like, man, this is exciting stuff. So don't miss that. It's not like we need to minimize it and make it plain and boring, but let's let it be encouraging to us. That's the point. Okay. Let's see. Big lesson of Revelation. Here's what the book is basically about. And, as I studied it more, I might tweak this statement or whatever. But basically, the book of Revelation is the victory of the Lamb, the victory of God's people. That God, as some have put it, Jesus wins, or God wins. And so related ideas to that, they're kind of all connected in this web of ideas. But God's in control, Satan's defeated, the wicked will be punished, the righteous will be rewarded, they'll be blessed. So we need to be faithful. We need to be faithful to death. We get victory through death, as we're persecuted or die for Christ. That's our victory. The victory's already won. Kind of all those points related. But kind of that core idea is God wins, the Lamb has won. We follow in the footsteps of the Lamb. That's a picture in the book. And we go where he goes, even if that leads to death. So that's what we're going to see is the victory of God's people. So we'll keep coming back to that. Okay, was there a hand that was okay. So someone read, please, Revelation 1, verses 1 through 11. Can someone read that nice and loud? Okay, so here's kind of the intro to the book, getting us down to the listing of the 7 churches of Asia. So usually, the beginning of a New Testament letter kind of introduces the whole book. You just see, like, in those introductory thoughts, a lot of the bullet points that are going to show up later on in the book. 1 Corinthians might be the best example of that, but that's in Romans, and you kind of see in a big book, the kind of things that introduce it are the things that tend to show up a little bit later. And so we'll see that here as well. What are some ways that Revelation here in the first 11 verses that we just read, what are some ways that this starts like a typical New Testament letter? If you've studied Romans, 1st, 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, what are some ways that these verses here just sound like a totally typical other letter of the New Testament? Okay. Yeah, so verses 1 through 3 kind of set up what this is. This is this revelation of Jesus Christ. But then you get to verse 4, John gives the author right there. And that's what they would do back then. So you don't have to unroll the entire scroll to get to the end. It's like our emails, where you have your inbox, and what do you see right first? Who it came from. That's what they did. So this is from John. Good. What else? Greeting, grace and peace. It sounds like Paul, right? Grace and peace. Good. What else? Okay, so John to the 7 churches in Asia. Good. And what about like end of verse 5 and 6? Like a little prayer, that's common, to him who loved us and freed us. So that kind of benediction, doxology, kind of praise and prayer common. So really, verses 4 through 7 by itself just sound like your typical, usual New Testament epistle. If you just took out those verses, it just kind of point by point goes through what we would expect. And my PowerPoint is going crazy. So, author to this church, grace and peace, praise to God, that whole idea. Okay, so who are these 7 churches? Write what you see in a book, send it to the 7 churches: Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. Okay, so here's a really good map that it says Anatolia. Nobody calls it Anatolia. Geography nerds do, I suppose. What part of the world are we talking about here? Asia, yes, and Asia was this region over here, fairly small, big, but fairly small. We say Asia Minor, but that term is not used in the New Testament. What's the modern country that we're talking about? Turkey. We're talking about Turkey here, right? And people call all of Turkey Asia Minor. That's fine, but in the Bible, Asia does not mean Asia Minor. Asia in the Bible means this region right here on the western strip of Turkey. That's Asia. So you keep going over, that's not Asia anymore. That's Galatia, or that's those other Pontus, whatever, other regions over there. Okay, 7 churches. Now, do you notice anything about the order of these cities? Kind of go in a circle. Exactly, right? And so even, it's like Ephesus is the first one, which is the closest. Okay, so it did mention, we haven't hit on this yet, but Patmos is where John is. He's exiled there. That's in verse 9. So here off the coast is Patmos. And then Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodicea. And some have suggested it's not only just a loop, but it might be the route of a guy going to carry a message. And so, the messenger gets this letter, or, John sends it to Ephesus. Ephesus was huge. Ephesus was the 3rd largest city in the Roman Empire. And so, really big, important city in that part of the world. So, it starts in Ephesus, right? And then some guy might take a path and bring this letter around. We'll hit on this more as we get into chapters 2 and 3. But as you're thinking about the book of Revelation, chapter 1 is kind of the intro. Chapters 2 and 3 are the 7 churches, the kind of the messages to the 7 churches. It's fine to say the 7 letters, not a big deal, but it might be better to say this whole book is a letter, and that each church gets a little message to them in chapters 2 and 3. So that's going to become pretty crucial to us. We're going to get very familiar with these 7 churches. Revelation was written to them, and Revelation was written for them. And so that's a helpful perspective. Now, Revelation is written for us as well. It just wasn't really directly written to us because I didn't live in Ephesus 2,000 years ago. But it's still for us, right? So we're going to get very familiar with these churches by the end of the book. What we need to do as we go through is kind of keep in mind that these are the people hearing this message. And when you do that, when you keep Revelation 2 and 3 in mind, when you go through the book, you'll start seeing things like, oh, Sardis needed that message. That's a Sardis issue, right? Sardis is told that there's people defiling their garments. Well, guess what? You get later on in the book, and God's people are those who have not defiled their garments. And you go, oh, okay, yeah, that's kind of for Sardis there. Or Smyrna, they're being persecuted. This would be really encouraging to Smyrna, So we need to keep that in mind as we go through. One person has suggested it'd be a great exercise to read the book like from the perspective of the Ephesians. So read chapters 1 through 22 like you're from Ephesus. And then the next time, read it through like you're from the perspective of Smyrna. Next time, read it through like you're from the perspective of Pergamum. Well, you can do that on your own time. We're going to do a miniature version of that and kind of assign us to be thinking of that. But we'll get there in a second. Okay, I'm going to teach you a song, and you're obligated to sing the song. I mean, it's somewhat kind of a kid's song, but who cares? Because it's a great way to memorize the 7 churches of Asia. And the tune is very similar to Doe a Deer, a female deer, like we all know that song. So the idea of this song is to not only give the 7 churches, it gives a little thing that goes with it. Usually there's an effort to be clever. I'm not saying it is clever, but there's an effort to be clever. So Ephesus had the wrong emphasis. Get it? Because Ephesus sounds like emphasis. Get it? Okay. Smyrna was about to be burned. Pergamum needed to purge their Balaam. Thyatira tolerated a tyrant. Sardis, reputation was tarnished. Philadelphia, pillars are mentioned there. Laodicea is the lukewarm city. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to sing a line, and then you just sing it back, and then we'll practice it a few times. And then we'll sing the song a lot this quarter. But I guarantee you, by singing this song, it's going to get in your head the 7 churches, and you'll thank me for it. Like a few years down the road, you'll thank me for it. It won't happen immediately, but eventually you will. Okay, so I'll sing it, and then you can repeat it. Ephesus had the wrong emphasis. Ephesus had the wrong emphasis. Smyrna was about to be burned. Smyrna was about to be burned. Pergamum needed to purge their Balaam. Pergamum needed to purge their Balaam. Thyatira tolerated a tyrant. Thyatira tolerated a tyrant. Sardis' reputation was tarnished. Sardis' reputation was tarnished. Philadelphia, they were pillars definitely. Philadelphia, they were pillars definitely. Laodicea, it's the lukewarm city. Laodicea, it's the lukewarm city. It's the 7 churches of Asia. It's the 7 churches of Asia. Okay, so let's do it again, and we'll do it again later on in the class to get this in your head. And that'll be useful. Okay, I'll lower just a little bit. Let's try it all together. Ephesus had the wrong emphasis. Smyrna was about to be burned. Pergamum needed to purge their Balaam. Thyatira tolerated a tyrant. Sardis' reputation was tarnished. Philadelphia, they were pillars definitely. Laodicea, it's the lukewarm city. It's the 7 churches of Asia. And you'll notice that just like Doadir, that every one, you go up the next note where it starts. So it's trying to kind of copy that because it's the 7 notes of the scale, 7 churches. It all works together. Okay, so here's what I want to do, is assign for you in this class for the next quarter that you're going to, at least a little bit, read this book the next 3 months from the perspective like you're from one of these cities, okay? So you're going to kind of be the Thyatira guy all quarter long, okay? And we're not going to make a big deal out of this, but at times we're going to go, okay, hey, does any of this apply to your city? And, you know, you've read the Thyatira paragraph, and you know the situation of Thyatira, and you'd be like, yeah, Thyatira, they need to, you know, kick out Jezebel, because they're tolerating a tyrant, you know, that kind of thing. And then there'll be times where it'll be like, hey, this really applies to Sardis. Oh, yeah, they need to keep their garments, you know, unspoiled, that kind of thing. So I don't have a great sense of how many people are in this room. So let's try to at least to first go through here, have 4 to 5 people for each city. And just raise your hand. I'm not going to write it down. You just need to know, right? Take responsibility. So can I have 4 people who are willing to be Ephesus? Just raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, can I have 4 people willing to be Smyrna this quarter? Jamie, did you want to be Ephesus? Is that what you're doing, Jamie? Okay, great. So be with them as well. Smyrna. I need 5 people. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pergamum. Who's going to be Pergamum? 1, 2, 3, 4. One more. Can I get a 5th? Anyone? Get a 5th. Great. Pergamum. Thyatira. Raise your hand when I say Thyatira. Good. 1. Other people. Are you guys like all holding out for Philadelphia or something? It's not the same Philadelphia as in Pennsylvania. Just, you know, spoiler. Okay, Thyatira. We just have 1 for Thyatira. 2, 3, 4. Sardis. Some Sardis. 1, 2, 3, 4. Philadelphia. Philadelphia. Anyone? No one. So it's Laodicea that you're all excited about. Okay. Philadelphia got 1. You said Laodicea? No, you're Philadelphia now. Okay. A couple others for Philadelphia. Please. Surely I would. Philadelphia 2, 4. Okay, and then Laodicea. A few people raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. One more. At least one more. Someone can raise their hand. Someone can do it. Michaela. Okay, so that gives us at least 4 or 5-ish on each one. If you didn't raise your hand, pick one. Pick a random one. But I just wanted to have a few, at least for each. And so then, as we read the 7 churches, I want you to pay extra attention to that one. And then this quarter, if I say, you know, the people from Ephesus, would this apply to your church? That, you know, you kind of got those, that's going to be your perspective just a little bit, just to let that be your focus for the quarter. Okay, so here it is. What you'll be doing this quarter is read the book, especially with a mind for your city's situation. Their needs, their weaknesses, what would be encouraging to them, what might be particularly useful for them. So that's what we're going to be doing. Okay, yeah, Dan. Yeah, for sure, yeah. So, I mean, in general, we're just going to tend to be like the culture around us, so the weaknesses of the city are likely to be our weaknesses. And so, yeah, I'm not, at this point, I'm not even thinking about being that specific city versus church, but the city that they're in, and we'll see this when we jump into chapter 2 and 3, is impactful because some of them are being persecuted by the Jews that are around there, or impacted by false teachers that are particularly in that city. And so a connection, there's also things like Laodicea had aqueducts that brought in water, and guess what? The water that came into Laodicea was lukewarm. So it's like a thing, it's like a connected thing. So, and so there is a connection between the church and the city, but the members, of course, of the church there. Okay, so looking at verses 1 through 3 here in the little bit of time we have left, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants the things that must soon take place, he made it known by sending his angel to his servant John, who bore witness to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, even to all that he saw. Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear and who keep what is written in it, for the time is near. So what stands out to you from this introduction to the book, these 3 verses?
Where the word came from God, Jesus, the angels.
Yes, yeah, kind of this link. God gave the revelation that came from Jesus, God gave it to him, and he sent his angel. And so you kind of have that chain link there. Good. What else stands out to you? Yeah, Brian. Okay, very good. Yeah, and that really connects to this theme here. The read aloud on one level is back then they would tend to read things aloud. We read to ourselves. We read quietly. We train our kids to be able to read things quietly. In general, they would read and read out loud. But it's more than that, because the picture here, I suspect, is reading aloud to a congregation, right? So whoever gets this letter, and then they read it to the congregation. Blessed are those who read aloud the words of the prophecy to the group, and then blessed are those who hear it, and then everyone, blessed are those who keep it, because the time is near. And so blessings for all 3. Good. Yeah, Jeff.
When he said the time is near, he was urging all people to live life and be ready for the second coming.
Yes, that's right. And that kind of language, it is just through the New Testament. And, one thing that I don't think a lot of people think about is you have this tension in the New Testament where there are some things that are prophesied as coming. Like, what did Jesus say was coming in Matthew 24? The destruction of Jerusalem. But at the same time, Jesus also said, I can kind of come back at any time. So you have this tension of there are some specific things that are prophesied, but Jesus can come at any time. And I do think thinking that through helps us to understand New Testament prophecy better. That may be a part of why it's hidden in the way it is because Jesus wants to be able to not only tell us some things that are going to come, but also be telling us I can come at any time, and for those 2 truths to work together. Okay, what else stands out here, Mike?
Well, just thinking about that, reading this scripture aloud. Every one of those churches knew that this was going to be read aloud in all the other churches.
Yes.
And it gives you a personal emphasis on what do I need to do as a church, as a congregation. How do I need to straighten my life up? And he wasn't very subtle with them. He was very blunt with them.
Yes.
And so it helps us to realize that God wants the best for us, that sometimes it's going to take something on our part.
Okay, very good. Soon take place, time is near. We've kind of hit on that already. Christians are told these things would happen soon. We need to be primarily seeing a first-century application to the book. This fits in with what we've been saying. That's the next slide. Writer John here, almost certainly the New Testament apostle that we read so much about in other places in the New Testament. But what does John do? He bears witness to the Word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, even all that he saw. This is a really big theme in Revelation, is being a faithful witness to God and a faithful witness to his Word. And so the book starts off by saying that John bears witness. John was a faithful witness of the things that he saw, a faithful witness to the testimony that Jesus proclaimed, a faithful witness to everything that was there. So John's a faithful witness. There's lots of people who are faithful witnesses. By the time the chapter's over, Jesus is called the faithful witness. Chapter 2, Antipas is called the faithful witness. You could do an easy word search and see all the times the word witness shows up in the book of Revelation. It's a lot. So that's this theme here of being a faithful witness to the gospel, faithful witness to God's word, to proclaim it, not to change it, not to shrink back from it, but to bear witness to the words of God. And John did it, and that sets up this theme for the book, to be a faithful witness to God and to his word. Any other thoughts through verses 1 through 3 here? Okay, so then, and we've already hit on this. Let's just read it here and do it. This does sound like Jesus, right? He was used to hear, let him hear. Blessed are those who hear it and who keep it. Yeah, Bruce.
I think it's interesting. In John's gospel, we have basically the same wording there, but it said a man came to God, his name is John. He came for a witness that he might bear witness of the light, and he is not the light. He came that he might bear witness of the light.
Yes.
Similar.
Yes, very similar. Now, that's probably why, apparently there's some guy, I just heard about this secondhand, some guy who said that he thinks that Revelation was written by John the Baptist. And you're like, that doesn't work. But that's probably why he thought that, right? Because he sees that John's a faithful witness, the beginning of the Gospel of John, and there. So okay. Okay, so verses 4 and 5. John to the 7 churches that are in Asia. Grace to you and peace. Sounds just like a Paul letter. To him who was and is to come, from the 7 spirits before the throne, and from Jesus Christ, the faithful witness, the firstborn of the dead, the ruler of the kings of the earth. So God here, the Father, is described as he who is and was and is to come. Now, one of the things we're going to notice as we study the book of Revelation is how many hymns we sing that are based on this text. We sing so many songs. And when we're singing Holy, 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 it kind of uses old-timey language. But how does it show up in Holy, Holy, Holy? Who wert and art and evermore shall be, right? That's the same thing. Who was and is to come. Wert and art and always shall be. And so that's the same idea. Who is and was and is to come. From the 7 spirits before the throne. This is clearly on some level, a reference to what? The Holy Spirit, because you have the Father, you have God, you have Jesus Christ, and you have the Spirit, and so this is clearly that. I think it's the idea of the fullness of God's Spirit. I think it's probably an Isaiah 11:2 reference there. You have the Spirit that will be upon the Messiah, and it lists like the Spirit of wisdom, the Spirit of, and it goes through the 7. And so I think it's that idea, the fullness of God's Spirit. I'm not sure exactly why John described it that way, but there's a sense in which someone can have the Spirit of wisdom from God on them, but that doesn't mean they have all of God's Spirit. And so this is the 7 spirits, the fullness of God's Spirit there. And then Jesus Christ described as the faithful witness, these 3 descriptions. The faithful witness, right? So Christ himself spoke everything that God wanted him to speak. He was faithful. Did Jesus compromise the message? No. Did Jesus change what God wanted him to say? No. He was faithful until death. So Jesus Christ was the faithful witness. You're starting to see this theme. John was a witness to the word. Jesus was a faithful witness. He's the firstborn from the dead. What's that mean, the firstborn from the dead? Conquered through being raised from the dead. Yeah, the resurrection, yeah. The firstborn of the dead, from the dead. There, he's the first to be raised and glorified. He's kicking off the resurrection. He's the firstborn is also the idea of dedicated, given to God. It's also the idea of a place of honor. Israel was God's firstborn. So he's the firstborn of the dead. There's a lot packed into that. But and then the ruler of the kings of earth, right? He's the Messiah, Psalm 2. He rules the nations with a rod of iron. And we're going to see that terminology shortly coming up, that Christ rules the nations with a rod of iron. Yeah, Brian.
Mentioning parallels of those pulled out, it's really easy for Christians to get depressed and follow news all in this world, whether it's in our country, whether it's in Russia, China, Iran, whatever. You got to remember that Christ is in charge, and that's what this book is all about.
Yes.
Christ is in charge.
Yes.
People always be victorious. And the same kind of focus for us today.
Yeah, that's exactly right. He's in charge. He rules the nations. He's in control of it all. All these things that are going to happen to them are because God's allowing it. Now that may not make sense to us, but God's in control. He's going to allow this to happen for a while, and then he's going to also put it to an end. So even here at the beginning of the book, it's emphasized that Jesus was faithful. He died. He was raised up and blessed, right? Raised to the right hand of God. He's brought to God to rule. And so this kind of path of Christ, the faithful witness, faithful till death. He dies. He's the firstborn from the dead, raised to be ruler of the kings of earth. That path of Christ, well, guess what? That's the path that we follow. We are faithful. We need to be faithful till death, faithful to God's word, to the gospel. We'll be raised and we'll rule with Christ. And we're going to see that exact picture for us here in Revelation. Christ is ruling, we rule with Christ. Okay, in the time we have, I do want to go back and... What's that? Absolutely. You guessed it. Okay. Ephesus had the wrong emphasis. Smyrna was about to be burned. Pergamum needed to purge their Balaam. Thyatira tolerated a tyrant. Sardis' reputation was tarnished. Philadelphia, they were pillars definitely. Laodicea, it's the lukewarm city. It's the 7 churches of Asia. Very good. Very good. You guys are getting it. Okay. Any other thoughts through verse 5? Sorry. Beginning of 5. Beginning of 5 here. Yeah, Bruce.
Being a witness itself, the word witness, and I know you had to teach Christ spoke the word.
Yes.
And back to John 1:1, talking about being a witness. He was a teller forward. Because what it means is that you're not witnessing Christ stand up telling some kind of story. You're a teller forward of the good news.
So it could be more general of like a witness in court. What's a witness in court? They're telling what happened, right? Did you see the car accident? Here's what happened. Here's what happened. But in general, what we would see here is that to be a faithful witness is true to the message, true to God's word, true to the life that you know. So you can be a witness through your actions, and that would be being a faithful witness as well. So Christ preached what he was supposed to. Here, so I think in general we would see that this is preaching the message you're supposed to. Yeah, which is kind of your point. Yes, absolutely. In fact, the Jehovah's Witnesses have totally hijacked and claimed that as their phrase. But Isaiah 43 is it? You are my witnesses. Yeah, we're supposed to be witnesses of what God has done, usually that's talking about being faithful to the word. And we're going to see Antipas, the faithful witness, he dies because he was faithful. That whole idea. Was there another hand, Jeff or Brian? Yes.
That should be the natural conclusion when we hear, when we understand, is to act.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So because they're about to be facing persecution, it's going to be real clear if they're acting or not. Are they being faithful or being faithless? So with all of that, their faith is going to be in a time of testing, and are they listening? Are they obeying or not? Yeah, Dan.
That list of that chain of communication from God to Jesus to the angels to John and the churches, is that simply to just create a greater
I don't. I don't. I mean, it could be a lot of little things, like you said. It kind of highlights the effort that it took to get it to them. Is it that Jesus appears, but it's not so much that Jesus is leading his hand through 22 chapters, like in Dante's Inferno, who's the Latin guy who drags Dante through it all. You know what I mean? So it's really this angel that's doing it. I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Just thinking of seven spirits, but also probably seven candlesticks.
Yes.
Like seven churches, which is a thing that he's talking about.
Yes. And it may even mention that. Okay. Thank you all. Appreciate your attention.